Hey, if you're involved in a retail business, you know that the reporting in GA4 can be a challenge, especially if you're trying to get data across to, executives or marketing teams. The information's kind of spread all over the place. So one of the things we recommend is setting up a Looker Studio dashboard that will help the various teams that you need to get that reporting to on a regular basis so that they're not having to click around in Google Analytics. So we're going to take a look at how to set up a dashboard specifically for retail, but it could be used for other businesses as well. Let's take a look at what we're talking about. All right. So when you're in Google Analytics, if you look at the typical dashboard, we're looking at the Google Merchant Shop dashboard, the sample data. You can see right off the bat that, the basic report that you get on the homepage has, users, conversions, event count, new users, not particularly friendly for retail or anything like that, because one, what are those conversions? What do they mean? What is the conversion rate? And for retail, what is the revenue? And this could be used for other types of businesses as well, because, is there a monetary value for getting a lead or getting another conversion, something like that. So now you can obviously click down into the reports, and now you're starting to see things like revenue. So it'll have total revenue, average engagement time on the site, new users, that kind of thing. But again, no conversion rate, how many orders are being placed, that kind of stuff is not apparent. And even if you click on things like monetization, and you go to the overview, here again, you have revenue, but you don't have, specific purchases like orders, average order value, those types of things that your executive team is going to want to know that are important for understanding the health and well-being of your retail business. So you can poke around in many of these reports, you can get some of the data, but it's not in a great centralized and consolidated area. So we're going to jump into Looker Studio and see how we can do that and get this data to the people that need it. All right, so you can see we're in Looker Studio. We're going to create a new dashboard. Now, before you dive into creating a dashboard, you're going to need to understand what are the things that you want to show people. So like I said, there were certain things from the basic reporting in Google Analytics 4 that you might want to show your executive team. There's going to be data that the marketing team is interested in. There's going to be data that your merchandisers are going to be interested in. And so plan ahead for how you want to structure the report. One of the things that we recommend doing is just sitting down with a pencil and paper and kind of sketching it out and figuring out what are those data points that you've had requested from you, what are the things that would be important for people to see, and then figuring out a logical way to do that in the dashboard. You're also going to need to think about sources of data. So by default, we typically think of GA4 data coming through on the Looker Studio dashboards because it is a Google product. But is there other outside sources of data? Google Ads, BigQuery. Do you need to import stuff from Google Sheets? Maybe it's, for instance, maybe you don't use Google Analytics and you use some other tool and you need to export and then import the data that way. Or maybe it's from social media. Maybe you want to report on likes and that type of thing, or Facebook ad costs, and you don't have that pulled in automatically into Google, and you need to think about where that data is coming from. Now, there are third-party tools that you can use to pull in, like Facebook ads data, for instance. These are paid tools typically, but you can use those to connect to those data sources and pull that in so you don't have to import sheets. But for this exercise, we're going to take a look at Google Analytics data. We're going to use the demo account from Google, their merchant shop, and add that as a data source. Okay, we can get rid of the default chart. One of the things that we like to start out with for especially retail clients and businesses is to take a look at the high level, what we would call executive report. So what are the executives, the C-level people going to want to see in a report that gives them a glance at your data that they can understand how things are doing that week, that day, or that month. And so we usually start out with some high-level metrics related to that they can just glance at. So we're not going to get into a whole bunch of formatting and stuff like that, but just look at the data that we want to pull in. So out of the gate, we're probably not going to want to look at views. We're going to want to look at revenue, because that is probably the premier metric that anyone's going to want to see. I'm just going to make this bigger. We probably don't need the cents in there, so I am going to style this one just because it doesn't need to be that large. Just use compact numbers. All right, there we go. So now we have revenue. I am going to increase the size of the font just to make it a little bit easier to read for our purposes. Good. All right, so now we have that card. And now we won't think about the other transactional related metrics that you're going to want to see in the typical executive report. And I'm just going to copy this and move this over so that we are pulling from the same data source. All right. And so typically another metric that people are going to want to see is your number of transactions. So orders, how many orders were there? And then you're also probably going to want to see conversion rate. Now, one thing, conversion rate is now available in Looker Studio. You can have conversions as well as user or session conversion rate. Now, the one caution that I will have with this is that conversion rate, particularly for retail, you're typically looking at the conversions of orders. And so within GA4, you can have a lot of different conversions. A number of things can be listed as conversions. And let's take a look at that. So if you go into the demo account and look in the admin and look at conversions. Now on their site, they only have purchases set up as a conversion. However, you may have on many sites, form download or form fills, contact info submissions, even add to carts. Those types of things can be listed as a conversion. And so you just want to be aware of that. Make sure that you're checking whether you're going to do conversions or not, just out of the gate. Okay, and in this situation, we're going to go ahead and just use conversion rate that's out of the box because it is the conversion rate that we want. It is possible to go in here and create metrics or calculated metrics. And you can do that by either clicking on here and create field. And then you can put in your variables here, name it what you want. In this case, you'd want it as a percentage. So you could do that. And then you put in transactions and that kind of thing. Or you can do that over here as well. So you can create those metrics there. So let's just go back to this one and change it because we messed that up. So conversion rate. And again, sessions and user conversion rates are going to be different numbers, but many people typically look at session conversion rate, the number of times people are visiting. You can see it's a very high conversion rate for this site. And so we have 3 of the main metrics for a retail site. Now, we're also going to take a look at average order size because that is another important thing that people will typically want to see. So we're going to see what we can do is create a field for this one. So call it AOV divided by transactions. And then this is a currency. And so we're going to use dollars. Here. And now we have AOV as well. So as you can see, we're starting to build out a quick glance at key metrics that are going to inform about the revenue related data from the website, right? And so we would typically, in most dashboards, group these together. Obviously, we'd probably make these a little bit nicer to look at. But we're also going to want to look at traffic and engagement rates and that type of thing to inform about how people are using the site. And so in situations like this one where you see this name is too long, the session conversion rate, you can go ahead and change that just by clicking on that and giving it a new name. And that makes it a little bit easier to fit in your dashboard. All right, so now we have those. Let's do a new one. Let's create another section here for traffic and engagement. So we're going to look at sessions. And we're going to have users. And you can see here, there is a lot of different types of users that you can be looking at, like active users. That means people who have actively been engaged with the site over a period of time. New users, we'll look at that as well. But we're going to look at total users. And total users means unique users to the site for the given period of time that you're reporting on. And so sessions is a larger number because that's every time that they came back. So if somebody came back multiple times, it's going to count that as a session. But these are the unique users for that time period. And so that's going to be a different number depending on the time frame that you're looking at. So you may have a certain number of users in the week, but if you look at the month, that is the users for that month. So if even if they came back several times, it's only going to count that once. So I tend to focus on the users because sessions can be tricky because it depends on when they come back, how long they paused, did they leave the tab open, all that kind of stuff. So sessions is a kind of wishy-washy metric a little bit. It does show you how often they've come back, but it could just be because they walked away from their computer, that type of thing. All right, so we have sessions, we have users. Let's look at engagement. Or actually, let's look at new users because that is an important metric. So how many of those people are new coming to the site? And now let's look at things like engagement. So engagement rate. So that is the opposite of bounce rate. So these are people that didn't bounce. So they engaged in the site, they scrolled, they went to another page, that kind of thing. So that is the opposite of bounce. So how many people are actually using your information? Okay. Another thing that we can look at is how many people are actually adding things to cart. How many add to carts happen? So are people actually starting the checkout process? And there's any number of other engagement type metrics that you might want to look at that is for, how they're engaging with the site. So did they scroll? Did they do anything like that? The other thing is if you have custom events that you've set up, you might want to look at those. So did they click on certain buttons? Did they, click on certain navigation items, that type of thing. So that can all be important information depending on what you've customized for your own site. So this is not, the end of what you can report on, but it's just some typical things that you might want to report on. But basically all of your available metrics are down here in this column. And so you can see, is there something that you've had specific requests for? Is there certain types of engagement that you want to report on? So maybe it's item views or product views or click to calls or click to chat. Did they engage with the chat bot or something like that? Those are all engagement metrics that you might want to include here. I'm not sure what Google has set up here, but let's see if they have checkout started. Okay. You can also have things like discounts used. All of that kind of stuff is also available. All right, so now let's take a look. So we have total revenue, we have transactions, average order size, conversion rate, we have traffic related items, and engagement type items. So again, those could be, are not the end of the list, but just the high level ones that are most likely going to want to be used. So with these dashboards, I always like to include some quick, especially for executive dashboards, some quick charts that they can look at to get an idea of things that are happening over time. So total revenue is actually a good one to start at. And you can format this to format the charts to be smooth or bar charts, whatever that might be. This is probably fine there. Typically, I do like to use these to look at time over something. So compare this to previous time frame, and that you can look at. Maybe it's if this is going to be a weekly report, is to look at just the previous period, previous year, that type of thing. So I'm just going to set this to previous period. Okay, and similarly, traffic is another thing that people like to trend. So let's look at traffic as well. And we have the date. So let's do sessions just because that is traffic per se. And we've got sessions. Now, some people do like to include spark lines, which is just a small chart beneath each of these sections just to give you an idea of like upward trends and that kind of thing. That's totally up to you. I do like to add controls to all of my reports. And so you can see we have controls that are a number of different things that you can do, from drop-down lists to input boxes to sliders, that kind of thing. These are all going to refine the data on the site. So for instance, you could do a drop-down list that is categories on the site or marketing channels, that type of thing. But I usually like to do a date control. And then you set this to whatever you want it to be. So I usually, if you wanted to look at last week all the time, like if this is going to be a weekly report, you can do that, or you can look at last month, which depending on the audience needs. Now again, you can format this to be larger, to be colored, that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about that now. But what I will say is handy is if you right click on this, you can make this report level. And where this becomes important is now when we create new pages, this is going to be on every page and it's going to impact every page. So that way they don't have to go in and change the date on every additional page in the report. Now, obviously you can add different branding or information up here. You can, name your report. So it's, executive dashboard or something like that. And then I'll make this larger. And you can also make this, if, for instance, if it was a logo or something like that, you can make this report level as well, just by right-clicking on it, and that will then be on every other page as well. So this is your executive dashboard. You may have other metrics on here. You may want to add other charts and insights. You may want to add spark lines to this. Again, that's all up to you. But these are kind of the high-level metrics that I would expect to see on an executive dashboard. Okay, let's add a page. Okay, and you can name them here. So let's name this one executive, and we'll name this one marketing. Okay, now on this page, we're going to take a look at some of the marketing channels, right? So we're going to add a chart and create a table. And we're going to look at campaigns. Or you can look, so one of the things that we're going to look at a couple of ways that you can do this. You can look at campaigns. So the campaigns that you actually have running. And we're going to look at revenue, call this total revenue, total purchases. Total revenue. And then obviously we could add orders, percent change, all of that kind of stuff to this table as well. So that is the campaigns that they have running. But now you're going to also want to look at the channels, the default channels. And this is going to be the high level look of, organic search or email, that type of thing. And how much revenue those are bringing in. And so again, you can add other metrics here, like the number of orders, users, that type of thing. If you have signups on your site, all of those metrics can be added. I generally format these to get rid of the number. Row number, just because we don't need it in this, just kind of muddies it. And then you can add, obviously, high-level metrics for this, like specific revenue from certain marketing channels, conversion rate that you might want to report on for specific marketing channels. Maybe it's cost, cost per acquisition or something like that. We often also will create specialized reports or pages for each high-level marketing program. So one for Google Ads, for instance, or paid search, where you have the cost of that, and then you have the breakdown of how that is performing, like the cost per click, cost per acquisition or purchase, that type of thing, ROI or ROAS. Similarly, you can do that for Meta or your email marketing programs, those types of things, where you're breaking up more specific detail for each of those programs. And that's very helpful, obviously, for the marketing teams that are managing those programs. They're going to want to know how they're performing, whether they're profitable, that kind of thing. But since we're just focusing on this one on kind of more of an executive dashboard, we're going to give some high-level metrics about the campaigns that are performing well and the channels that are driving that. So, purchases, we're of course going to want sessions in here, and probably users. And just organize this a little bit. One of the nice things about Data Studio is that it can paginate. So if you have a report that only has a certain number of lines in it, you can choose to actually scroll through the data in here. So it's not just static. So you can see, you can kind of size those as you need to make them fit. So again, there's a lot you can do here as far as the marketing campaigns to show how they're performing and their cost and profitability. Again, this is Google's setup, or demo site, so we're not going to dive into each of those. But you can for sure and very easily set up different marketing campaign dashboards that are specific to those campaigns. And we do have a video, I believe, where we talk about that in more detail, and I'll link to that in the description. All right, and normally one of the pages that we would create in here is something for merchandising, where you have the item names, the purchases that are being made, that type of thing, to show what people are looking at. Google does not have this turned on for its data, but one of the things that we also will often look at, and it goes back to the engagement, high-level engagement metrics here, is to actually look at what pages people are looking at and how they're the top, pages and sources of content there. So we're going to add a table that does that. We're going to look at page. And, that could be landing page, page path, page title, which is probably more informative than the URL. Okay. And we're going to look at views. And depending on how they have this set up, you can also sometimes look at revenue. And that's revenue associated with that page. And so you can see here that, particularly landing pages and that kind of thing, that could be very useful to be able to see how much money that's generating and which pages are more popular. You can then order this by either views or revenue to see which is getting the most views or the most revenue, whichever is more important to you. And this can kind of inform you about the content that's performing, those popular areas of your site, and that type of thing. Again, this will help to inform some of your performing and performance of the site and making sure that things are working correctly. Let me give you a quick look at another dashboard. So you can see one that's more formatted and some of the metrics that we're looking at here. This again is a retail site, and we have breakout like we talked about where it's total users, sessions, new users, and then we have it broken out by the conversion. So the total revenue for the period, the conversion rate, transactions, and their average order size. And you can see we included the typical graphs for each of these to show changes compared to the prior month. So this is monthly reporting. On this one, we also have broken out the data for the top revenue sources. So their marketing channels, email, that type of thing. And then for this site, they wanted to understand the type of devices that people were using. This could also be a geographical breakdown or something like that, depending on your needs. This is more for a usability study for them so that they understand how things are performing, what types of users are purchasing, so that they can use that to inform further usability testing and site design, that type of thing. You can also see that they have a specific page for organic search. And again, these are just done using filters. And so you can have your revenue, basic revenue metric, but then they have a filter here that looks just at organic. So to include a medium that contains organic. And that way it's filtering out all the revenue, but only for that medium. And so all you need to do for those, and again, we have another video about this, which I will share with you in the description, but you just add the filter here, and then you create the business rules based on your needs there. So you can see here, they have all of these filtered and broken out by the different search terms and that type of thing. Paid search dashboard, if they were doing paid search, which they're not, you can see there's no data coming in for that. Various channel data. So this they have broken out. If you recall, this is one of those controls, much like the date control is also a channel control. And then you can choose which channels you want to look at. So that way you see the overall channels. And if I only wanted to look at email or organic or something like that, we can do that. And so you can choose which ones you want to see that will populate this report, and that will control all of these metrics on this page. So trending revenue, all that kind of stuff, you can see that right here. So as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility for reporting on various metrics that you want to report on. The important thing to keep in mind is who your audience is. What are the data points that they need to do their job or to understand how things are going on the site? So does it need to be a specific Google ads page, or do you need more SEO data to pull in more keyword information about what people are searching for on SEO, that type of thing? But the key part is really that executive dashboard, because I don't know, every company I've worked for, all the clients we have, the executive team wants something that's quick, easy to understand, and to see how things are performing. What's trending? How are we compared to last month or last week? How much revenue are we making? Are we profitable? So those are some quick and easy reports to make in Looker Studio that is a lot easier to get to this data than if you were to poke around in GA4, because that's just a pain in the butt, because you have to go to numerous reports to do that. And I don't know about your executives, but they're not going to take the time to do that. They barely take the time to look at dashboards, which is why it's also handy that you can share this. You can actually export these dashboards as PDFs and send them out, or you can even schedule them. So you can schedule these data reports. So if you just click on share, you can invite people to look at it. You can schedule delivery. You can get a link that links directly to the report, or you can download the report as a PDF and then send that to them via email. So I hope this is helpful, guys. We'll keep looking at some other ways to use Looker Studio. If there's something that you want to see, let us know. If there's certain tips or tricks that you've been looking for or frustrations that you're having, let us know that too. Or if there's something that you're trying to do in GA4, we'd love to hear about that, because GA4 is constantly changing. They're constantly adding new things. And so you may not be aware of those. So just let us know, and we'd love to talk to you about it. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.